You mentioned you have, various friends who are homosexuals. I don't know if you talked to them before you came here, but do you think they would be okay if you shared maybe one story?
So one of my friends, and she shared this on public, so she's, in fact, she's is in the book. I tell her story. Her name's Leslie, and Leslie, from the time she was 4 years old, she biologically female, but everything about her felt like a boy. And as a 4-year-old, she didn't even think about it. She didn't even really, the whole disconnect between how she felt and her body, her gender, it never really clicked until she was like 6 or 7 years old. And all of a sudden she's like, wait a minute, physically I'm a girl, but I'm not a girl. My body's a girl is the way she was wrestling with it. And she just even then was kind of assuming like, well, when I get older, maybe I'll just kind of transform into who I really am, a boy. Didn't even really think too hard about it. Just kind of assumed like, it'll work out in life, Until, the older she got, she realized that, oh wow, this is really tough, But she said, first of all, I didn't choose this. My parents didn't make me like this. Like there was nothing, you can't point to a specific identifiable cause. It's just from the time I was really conscious of my gender, I identified as a boy. And so throughout high school, but then she was early on accepted Jesus. She became a Christian early on, was active in her church. But during her teenage years, she had this, I love Jesus, I want to follow Jesus, and yet because of my struggle, I'm shunned by the church. I mean, she says, I can't even count how many times I was pushed down the stairs in high school. I can't even count how many times I was shamed by other Christians and made to feel like some other. And she says the breaking point was in her mid-teens. She was listening to a sermon preached by our pastor, and he was talking about the evils of homosexuality, how these abominations are corrupting our culture and they're after our kids. And then he says, even worse than these abominations are the mentally ill transgender people. They are, basically like they are unsavable, they're damned to hell, God needs to get rid of it. So she's listening to this with a genuine love for Jesus, but this genuine disconnect between her experienced gender. And then all her friends are like amening, and everything. And so at that point, she's like, well, if God is so ashamed of me and if God hates me, then I can't follow this God. Like that was her response. And so she basically said, I need to find a community where I'm loved and accepted. So she leaves the church and just basically, becomes part of the gay community. And she ends up getting married to another woman. 5 years after she gets married, after 5 years into her marriage, her wife dies from some disease. And so she's just wrecked. Her whole life is falling apart now. She ends up meeting a pastor who just simply gets to know her, loves her, doesn't even ask the whole question, but just loves her. And finally, she's like, do you know, like I'm transgender. Like I feel like I have to tell you that because apparently you don't know it. And he's like, oh no, I kind of assumed that, but are you free for dinner tomorrow night? Just want to keep hanging out with you. And so for the first time, she experienced love from a pastor. And so she ends up getting sort of resaved, if you will. And now she's a very committed Christian and runs a ministry towards people who struggle with gender identity and parents who have teens who struggle. When I hear her story about being so dehumanized, even though her everything about her posture, her direction, her motivation, her heart was spot on, just because she had this unique struggle, it just breaks my heart. But the problem is like that's one of tons of stories I could tell you. That kind of personal narrative is, it's different because everybody's different, but it's so common, where I felt dehumanized and, what was your phrase, shamed out of the church. It's exactly her. That was exactly her. And praise God that she came back because somebody reached out to her with the Christ-like posture. But a lot of people I know, they haven't. They've experienced love and acceptance outside the church. And I think acceptance doesn't mean we accept all forms of all behavior, right? Jesus accepted tax collectors doesn't mean he endorsed tax collecting. He accepted adulterers doesn't mean he endorsed adultery. And I think that's, as Christians, we need to somehow be able to genuinely accept people, as humans, as image bearers. And yet that doesn't mean that we endorse all of their behaviors. And I'm not even talking about homosexuality, I'm talking about whatever it is, So I think compassion is our number one response. At the same time, I don't celebrate it, I don't cheer it on or applaud it. I think I mourn over it. Like, wow, this is how powerful our sinful world is. This is how powerful sin is, that it can mess with us to such an extent. And I talked earlier about how the history of the church has such a bad reputation with this question. So this is where I think that our loudest voice should be compassion.